Well, some say music is getting worse and worse every year. Unfortunately, for the brainless morons who would have you believe that to be true, me and Tom have come to the debate armed with 20 examples to the contrary, which show that good music is in fact still very much alive and kicking. So come, journey with us as he and I present our respective top 10 albums of 2012. Kicking off our list at number 10, we have the debut album from Imagine Dragons, titled Night Visions. The thing I really love about this album is just how utterly unique it sounds. It has an undeniably distinctive style. It's a really great example of alternative rock as well, being really accessible and infectious even on a first listen. Radioactive kicks the album off in great style, a really electronic sounding track, but also really heavy, with deep booming lyrics. Beyond that, the album has many outstanding tracks, such as It's Time, On Top of the World, and Hear Me. Other tracks are simply stunning. The light, unmistakable underlying rhythm to Amsterdam makes for a really memorable pre-chorus and great listen, the bridge of the track leaving you with some lovely tinkly sound effects, followed by a huge vocal climax. My personal favourite track though is Bleeding Out, with its march-like drum beats and huge final chorus. The only thing stopping this album from moving higher up in the list is the sad fact that the final track, Nothing Left to Say, is blatantly stretched far beyond its working capacity, with a completely unnecessary moany outro. I can only presume this is an attempt to grapple another 2 minutes, an attempt to up the album length. This annoyed me, up until I heard the hidden track Rocks. It's a great way to end the album, really light but fast-paced. The onomatopoeic segment is really good too. Overall, a really solid debut album that showcases some impressive potential in an emerging band. Imagine Dragons are certainly ones to watch. Country God or the Girl by K'naan. Yep, it's time to find out about my favourite rap album of the year. One of the things I like about K'naan is that he's from the rare breed of rapper who isn't interested in using his lyrics to boast about how many girls he's had or wants to have. It's very refreshing to listen to K'naan and get a break from all that stuff all rappers can't get enough of. Swearing too. K'naan rarely swears in his rapping. Track 1, The Seed, kicks off the album with a fun, fast-paced guitar-filled rap. Following on, Golden Timbuktu forgoes such backing to put K'naan's voice nearer the front of the track. Something this produces is a charming contrast between K'naan's voice when singing the choruses and K'naan's voice when rapping the verses. It's a song about the loss of youth and contains some great lines such as "Time is the pen and not the ink," a metaphor that suggests time is the controller of our lives rather than us writing our times and experiences ourselves. It's a clever bit of juxtaposition, adding to the message of the song, that while youth may fade, true love will not. The fact that Golden Timbuktu never needs to manifestly declare itself to be a love song to get across its message is a testament to K'naan's excellent songwriting skills. K'naan's sense of humour is evident on the album too, such as in Waiting is a Drug, where he declares, "Shout out to anybody named Mohammed, 'cause no lie, I know about 100. Track 4 is better. No, I mean it's a song titled better. Not that it's better than the previous songs. Anyway, Better samples Lost by Coldplay, but you'll have forgotten that by the first chorus, because K'naan manages to make Better into a musical feast of optimism. Another notable song is Anybody Out There?, a duet with Nelly Furtado that brings a real pop feel to the album, and is a collaboration that works really well. K'naan once again samples on Hurt Me Tomorrow, where he samples the Beatles' Hey Jude. Once again though, he pulls it off well enough to make it sound a completely different song. The Sound of My Breaking Heart plays next, a song where once again K'naan manages to deliver both a great rap and a beguiling chorus. The best thing though, as earlier mentioned, is the way his singing voice and his rapping voice contrast and complement each other so nicely. It means there's no need for him to have a singer doing the choruses for him, as many rappers do. He can cover the entire track himself. A simple, almost fully sung ballad follows, 70 Excuses, where K'naan talks of different missed opportunities, surmounted by rejection by a lover. Tempo changes bring life back to the track every time it seems to be floundering, and there's a lovely horn-led percussion section fronting these tempo changes. The duet, Bulletproof Pride, starts to bring the album to a close, with Bono of U2 helping K'naan bring depth to the choruses. The album then concludes with the tremendous pop anthem The Wall. It's one of the best final songs I've ever heard, and make sure you don't leave the album with any ill will, with its hopeful message and tongue-friendly la 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 chorus. If Waving Flag was an advertisement for Coca-Cola, then this is an advert for casting prejudices aside. This then is a truly great album. But But the number on the rosette, that can only mean there are another 8 albums I consider better. Indeed there are. Anyway, moving on to number 8, where we find my favourite dance album of the year. It's the Wanted EP by The Wanted. It's The Wanted's first American release and was released solely in America, acting to highlight the best tracks from their first 2 studio albums. Their best 7 tracks packaged into one concise, fantastically dance-centred EP. That's one of my favourite features of the EP, in fact, that in just 7 tracks and 24 minutes you have so much fantastic dance material with no weak links or fillers whatsoever. The EP races into life with Glad You Came, a bare bones, softly sung intro leading straight into a beat-driven pre-chorus, which continues to build with a huge backing beat. The track concludes with another softly sung portion, which leads into Chasing the Sun. With its addictive, meaningless chorus that peaks early and repeatedly, the track is a sure winner. The chorus I mentioned does consist solely of repeated wha-oh-oh-ohs, but seems so innate that it fits nicely. And come on, this is a dance album, not a book of poetry. It doesn't need to be lyrically deep. Debut single, All Time Low, continues the onslaught of catchy beats, being much more vocally focused than the earlier entries to the EP. At track 4, Satellite is a previously unreleased track, but holds its own against the established hits surrounding it, with a chorus that peaks at a phenomenally high note. Lightning comes in strong with another gradual introduction, and proceeds to liken love to being as frightening as lightning. Whatever, like I said, dance music doesn't need deep lyrics. Heart Vacancy features beat-devoid verses, which makes a welcome refresher at the late stage of the EP, relying instead on small vocal peaks as the lyrics reach the chorus. Gold Forever proceeds to close the EP in a dazzling, lyrically optimistic yet experienced and mature style, with talk of saving memories of good times to combat future bad times. The best track and the best beat has been saved until last here, closing the EP with promises that present experiences will be remembered fondly. It ain't exactly Oscar Wilde, but it is a nice sentiment to end a fantastic album on. Position number 7 is occupied by Take the Crown, the latest solo album by pop superstar Robbie Williams. The introduction of producer Jack Knife Lee is a welcome change, pointing the Robbie Williams catalogue towards a safer direction, but also introducing a much more mature feel to the album than other recent efforts such as Reality Killed the Video Star. The level of production on Take the Crown really is a huge asset to it. The lyrics mostly still revolve around the introspective examinations so familiar to any Robbie enthusiast, such as in Gospel, where Robbie recounts a brief childhood romance with nostalgia, but also a sadness that a picture he took in his mind of that time has been lost. This stands nicely as a metaphor for time moving on, as the track ultimately hints Robbie is prepared at last to do, as he drinks to his teenage fiancée, wishing her well wherever she is now. The album continues with the nonsensical lead single Candy. It is an undeniably catchy song though, however devoid of meaning the lyrics appear. Personally, I interpret the lyrics as a crusade against an illusory woman far too enamoured with her own appearance, who thinks she's as appealing as Candy, but is so obsessed with how others think of her that she never stops to enjoy life. Fellow single, Difference, is a much more mature-sounding orchestral-tinged ballad about Robbie promising to change to win back a fictional fiancée. Further on in the album, Shit on the Radio provides an unexpected dubstep effort that certainly provides a nice surprise for the regular Robbie listener. This is followed by All That I Want, which speaks brutally of sexual, almost primitive feelings directed towards a woman. Robbie concludes the track by asking if we think of him less for expressing his sexual feelings so honestly. I certainly don't. I think that takes a lot of bravery. Odes to Bob Dylan and U2 follow, being Hunting for You and Into the Silence respectively, the latter being really moving in its lyrical sparseness and slow pondering conclusion. Unfortunately, Hey Wow Wow Yeah Yeah follows, which is basically just a chorus-heavy, overblown excuse of a song with no lyrical depth at all. It is in fact the only reason the album doesn't place higher in my top 10. Not like the others injects a final adrenaline boost to the album before Losers finishes it with a very mediocre duet. As a side note, the bonus track Reverse is lovely, but I'm reviewing the standard edition only, so I can't count that at all. Overall then, a fantastic start makes this a very good album, but a disappointing ending prevents it being nearer to the best of the year. At number 6 we have the Sing EP by Gary Barlow and the Commonwealth Band. The lead track, Sing, was written as the anthem for the Queen's Diamond Jubilee by Gary and Andrew Lloyd Webber, and features over 200 musicians from various Commonwealth countries within its 4-minute runtime. Amazingly though, it doesn't come over as too overworked. The different contributions fit really nicely and naturally together, and the contributors, mostly totally unknown to the Western world, really are top class. The track begins with a piano chord intro, with a single female voice provided by a young Kenyan girl. Then the track just bursts into vibrant life with percussion and choral vocals assaulting your ears from every direction. It makes for a really immersive experience when you really listen to it. The EP carries on in good style with a demo of the title track from Gary himself, who gives a very good vocal performance, which serves to give the listener a different perspective on the track. A fantastic reworking of the Beatles' Here Comes the Sun follows, being another Gary solo track. The EP concludes with 3 classic, quintessential British anthems: Amazing Grace, Land of Hope and Glory, and the National Anthem. The vocalists on these 3 are stunning. Also featured is an original song called Stronger as One, performed by Laura Wright, which even has the potential to become a new British anthem. The EP is a real piece of culture, and is great as an easy listen with its uncomplicated lyrics and enjoyable choruses. Unfortunately, it is short, but no hard feelings there, as it's marketed fairly as an EP. At number 5, California 37 by Train sits proudly. A much more folk rock than pop rock feel, and a surplus of acoustic sounds mark a move away from the sound of earlier Train albums. California 37 kicks off with This'll Be My Year, which has been compared in just about every review of the album ever to sounding very much like We Didn't Start the Fire by Billy Joel in its basic structure and lyrical cascade of historical events. I'm not going to break the stigma either. It does sound like We Didn't Start the Fire by Billy Joel, but that's good. The important fact is, Train don't plagiarise Joel's song, they just produce a fresh take on it. It's just a mature homage to a classic song. Drive By continues the album in impressive style, really pushing the folk sounds to the brink of being pop. It is, however, just another boring, mushy love song lyrically. Feels Good at First showcases the first full effort as a folk track on the album, talking of a new relationship with the protagonist of the song enjoying the simplicity of his feelings so early on in the relationship. Bruises takes the album briefly into the country genre, as Ashley Monroe and Pat Moynihan provide a perfectly choreographed duet to a great tune. I'd go as far as to call it the best duet on this top 10 list. Really stunningly graceful. 50 Ways to Say Goodbye brings a very fast tempo to the mix, with relentless choruses and a huge bridge that just pounds you with allure. The lyrics feature a man trying to think up a menagerie of preposterous different lies to tell his friends, so he doesn't have to tell them the truth, that he's been dumped. You Can Finally Meet My Mum is the seemingly obligatory dead relative tribute song that every band or artist seems to record these days. Train, however, pull it off fantastically, while mixing doubts about religion and the existence of heaven into the mix. Sing Together provides a real textbook folk song with a lovely melody and a great use of instrumentation to fade the track out. Mermaid follows up with a fascinating foray into the reggae genre with its jerky sounding beat, before We Were Made for This boasts a fantastic guitar solo and, As the Fog Rolls In, finishes off with a liberal dousing of sentiment and a great piano and guitar outro to the album. In conclusion, Train really used the short runtime of the album to perfection here, delivering great folk pieces with brief but equally strong forays into interesting secondary genres. Which brings us to the 4th best album of 2012, and also the first concept album on the list. It's Red by Taylor Swift. Genre-wise, it's a mix of country and pop. I claim it to be a concept album due to the whole album being a catalogue of relationships Taylor has experienced. The album presents her view that these relationships are ultimately dangerous and futile, but that at the same time she can't resist falling into them again and again. Red, then, is taken to mean both love and danger, and that's one of the factors that makes this album so interesting. The lyrics are very good throughout, with the possible exception of the line in title track Red that claims, "Loving him is like driving a new Maserati down a dead-end street." It's one of the most distracting metaphors I've ever heard. It works okay, I guess, just it doesn't flow with the song as well as it should. Beyond that minor flaw, the rest of the album is fantastic. Track 4, I Knew You Were Trouble, is certainly very interesting. At first the listener could be forgiven for labelling it as another country track. It at first appears to have a soft, understated chorus, this illusion taking you to almost a full minute into the track, where it suddenly metamorphosises into a dubstep track, full of electronic clashings. The harder sound of the chorus and conclusion to the track, brought about by the style shift to dubstep, represents the charged emotion of Taylor's feelings about the relationship. 22, meanwhile, is a barefaced pop anthem. Lyrically, I interpret it as a song of escapism, how by dressing up like a hipster, and by being someone other than the global celebrity she's become, Taylor can enjoy a night out clubbing. During the track, she seems to relish the danger in flirting with a man who looks like bad news, claiming she has to have him. I Almost Do is much more stylistically plain, Taylor talking about how she finds it hard to stay away from a certain old relationship, one that ended recently, but manages to persevere nonetheless. The lead track, We Are Never Ever Getting Back Together, is the catchiest song on the record, and features the simplest lyrics too. But every track here shines, and my personal favourite is actually Everything Has Changed, featuring the much overhyped Ed Sheeran. It talks of a new romance, presenting how simple and uncomplicated the relationship seems at such an early stage. This could symbolise a hopeful new start, but after the cyclical nature of relationships beginning and ending in quick succession that is established earlier in the album, it seems more likely this will just be another failed relationship. But no, fascinatingly, Taylor follows Everything Has Changed with 2 more tracks based on hopeful relationships, ending the album on a positive note, where the narrative voice at last seems content in a relationship. A happy ending. Yep. Final track, Begin Again, presents a very accomplished and hopeful narrative that is a joy to listen to and end the album on. My next choice, marking our entrance to the prestigious top 3 albums of 2012, is an album concisely titled Jeff Wayne's musical version of The War of the Worlds of the New Generation, a re-release of a 1970s orchestral-based concept album that recounts the story of H.G. Wells' sci-fi cornerstone novel, The War of the Worlds. Brilliantly combining lyrics, narrative passage and electronic music to retell the War of the Worlds story, this really is a predominantly instrumental masterpiece. Not only does this re-release, the narrator is none other than the epic Liam Neeson. He really does have a great narrative voice. In fact, you could listen to it for hours, which is good, because War of the Worlds The New Generation is nearly 2 hours long. One of the factors that allows the album to be so long is the way it uses motifs. Put succinctly, these motifs are short, easily recognisable sections of music that recur throughout the album and represent different characters in the story. It's an ingenious feature, meaning you can always know when a character is present by the change in the music. The tracks Eve of the War, Forever Autumn, and The Spirit of Man are the highlights of the album, with some stunning vocals from Barlow on the earlier 2, and some intriguing musings on religion on the latter. The plot of the album revolves around a sudden invasion of Earth by Martians, and follows a journalist as he struggles to adjust to the new world. There's a great ending to the story too. The album does a fantastic job of showing you the narrator's thoughts as the story progresses. I'm worried that if I told you any more of the plot it would ruin the story, so you'll have to listen to the rest yourselves. It's impossible to describe just how unearthly and engrossing the string-based orchestra makes it sound, easily making it the most beautiful album to listen to on this list. So then, we've reached the second best album of 2012, the runner-up as you may say. It's Little Episodes by Ian McNabb. Yep, this is the second time he's had an album featured on this channel. You can see a review of his eponymous album by clicking here. Back to the album at hand. Ian won the prestigious Liverpool Music Award for this full-on folk rock effort that sounds so different from his usual output, but that's one of his greatest qualities as an artist. He's a genre chameleon, and no 2 consecutive albums from McNabb sound alike. The album opens with the acoustic guitar-heavy Ancient Energy. It's a vaguely revolutionary sounding track from which McNabb's anger at the state of the world builds each verse until he states very clearly where all the princes and kings can go, if you get my meaning. It's not guttural though, it's handled really nicely, and if you can handle a few swear words in context, you can handle this. He's basically just saying that we should stand up for ourselves more as the citizens of the world. Only Children then provides a memorising insight into life as an only child, something McNabb has experienced firsthand. Next, McNabb takes the earlier social criticism to new heights, as High on a Hill accuses the bankers of caring only for themselves and being inexcusably greedy. He wrote himself a letter, reintroduces instrumentation to the mix with drums, piano and percussion, noticeable immediately, that go on to provide a lovely bridge to the track and make it stand out even further than the rest of the tracks on the album. The lyrics speak of a man getting back onto his feet from crippling self-doubt. McNabb once again seems to be urging listeners out of quiet passivity to notice events around them. Abigail Rain is the latest addition to McNabb's collection of songs regarding religion. It invents a deity who saves a village from drought in the 1900s, only to be ousted from the consciousness and prayers of the village by the rise of technology 100 years on. McNabb, however, goes on to hint that the village cannot survive without belief in its deity, leaving his opinion on religion ambiguous at best. A 4-line ditty, Irresistible Ruins, is another star of the show. The short length of the track, at barely a minute, makes it a really intriguing addition to the album. Penultimate track, King of Hearts, makes the best listen of the album though. It has a really sublime, echoing effect, amongst other factors, that gives the track much more weight than it ought to have as an acoustic recording. McNab goes on to demonstrate a stellar guitar work and fantastic voice on the bridge of the track. Anyway, I've talked for long enough on that. And so, we come to my top album of 2012. What could it be? Well, I'll lead you in slowly. This album is the artist's third studio album, and their third concept album too. The concept of this album is the artist's early adulthood, the previous album's themes being the artist's adolescence and childhood respectively. In other words, this album comes from a concept artist. Know who I'm talking about yet? Another clue, you say? This artist once auditioned to Simon Cowell and was told that he had no hope of ever being a professional musician and that he was a terrible songwriter. Here goes. My top album of 2012 is The Origin of Love by Mika. Let me explain why. Firstly, The Origin of Love is totally immersive to listen to. As I said before, it's a concept album about Mika's early years as an adult, and you really can't escape that theme as you listen to the album. It just feels so personal. Mika's first two album covers featured bright, vibrant imagery, but The Origin of Love forgoes this for a serious, bland cover, with only a hint of colour, symbolising the adulthood taking away the carefree fun of childhood. The opening track also happens to be the title track, and explores the adult Mika's feelings towards religion. The lyrics show Mika seeing the world through different eyes, and seeing that God is not responsible for anything in his life. He instead begins to shift the adoration he once had for God to his sexual partner. It seems he's been enlightened through adulthood, and now can see through society's lies. He pulls away from the Garden of Eden, casting it off as merely a story, but the song also shows that this transition of belief is not yet complete, as at the end of the song he falls into old habits and thanks God that he helped Mika find his new partner. Track 2, Lola, shows Mika trying to master and rein in his sexual feelings, claiming he isn't going to fall in love this time. Stardust features beautifully subdued lyrics to an electropop build-up until the first chorus, when Mika lets his phenomenal voice burst into life as the track becomes a riotous dance number featuring feelings of deep longing towards another. You'll notice I'm being very careful not to state a gender for these objects of Mika's affection, and that's because he's bisexual, and they could quite frankly be either male or female. Make You Happy describes selfless and mature adult feelings, Mika only wanting to please his partner, no matter what he has to go through to make him or her happy. In contrast, Heroes unmistakably appeals against soldiers being sent off to fight, Mika calling it someone else's war, and condemning soldiers dying so young. This truly is a persona then that is adult enough to see society's failings. In Kids, the last song I'll mention, I'm aware you people can't listen to me talking all day, Mika shows that the Mika in the songs is also adult enough to begin to distance himself from childhood, and forget what it feels like as he asks, "Kids, what do they know?" answering himself with nothing at all. To conclude, all lyrics here are meaningful, combining to give an overall picture of Mika's own early years of adulthood. The album sounds fantastic too. There are enough earworm hooks here to make you delirious, and Mika's voice really does take the album to another level, making it worthy of being the top album of 2012. Well, that was my top 10 albums of 2012. Let's turn over to Tom to see what his are.
2012. It was a good year for music. Very good year, in fact. Actually, I'd go as far to say it's been one of my favourites in recent memory. Still not quite as good as 2000, though. I mean, that had Kid A, Ayetes Birun, Software Slump, and, of course, Lift Your Skinny Fist Like Antennas to Heaven. I mean, how do you top that? You don't. You don't top that. So shut up. Still though, in terms of great releases, 2012 had them in spades. Certainly more than 10. However, we have to keep this list at 10, don't we? I mean, those are just the rules. I mean, what would you prefer? Top 13? Top 21? Top 35.7? No, you wouldn't. Because that'd be stupid. And you get enough of that when me and Johnny voice our opinions. So let's get to it. Number 10. Tame Impala with Lonerism. Oh my god, have you seen this thing? I mean, this would be on the list even if it was just an album cover with no CD. I mean, look at the sleeve art, it's fucking gorgeous. Suits the album perfectly too. I am surprised that this did end up on the list though. I mean, I approached this with a degree of hesitance due to my comparatively lukewarm reception to Innerspeaker with the rest of the online community. I did like it, sure, but I don't think it ever really clicked with me. I do like it a lot more now I appreciate Lonerism, but I still think it pales absolutely when compared to this album. It just sounds superior to me, that is Lonerism. The guitar is just so thick and powdery at the same time. It's slick and abrasive, it's crunchy and soft. It just has a great general sound. The riffs are really, really catchy, and the whole thing has this lovely static-like fuzziness that just feels like a big sonic hug. I can also detect the dream pop sounds much better on this than I could within a speaker. I would really describe it equally as a dream pop album as a psychedelic one, and to me that is a really, really big bonus. It's definitely on the abrasive side of dream pop, not quite pushing shoegaze, but hardly floating down a river of clouds. It still has that gorgeous quality of sweet sonic waves and walls, but it reminds you you're alive rather than making you not care anymore. It was certainly not my favourite record of the year, but it was very high on my total list indeed, and considering my initial response to Tame Impala, I consider making my top 10 to be a very big personal jump for the band. Number 9, it's Bloom by Beach House. Now, as I said in the previous entry, I'm a very big fan of dream pop, and it just so happens that Beach House are one of my favourite dream pop bands in the business. It's their sound that hooks me, really. I mean, Tame Impala come from that crunchy, scratchy side of dream pop, and artists like Grimes present the futuristic, electro and synth pop side, but Beach House, and especially on Bloom, give us these sweet, building waves of lullaby-like guitars that I just love so much. In fact, the whole album is a bit like a lullaby. I never really know just how much is going on in a Beach House song, because it all just sort of gets lost in this overall wave of sugary bliss, and whereas I usually like to be able to pick out all the different aspects and instruments and song, I really don't mind with this LP. I mean, it's the true essence of something that becomes greater than its constituent parts. When alone, the instruments could very well sound terrible, although I do doubt that, but when they're put together they create something that's just so irresistible. But the icing on the cake and the cherry on top is Victoria Legrand's voice. Much like the music, it's a powdery, relaxing, wavy sort of thing. She mixes these throaty, seductive lows with angelic highs, and she does it all with a sort of chilled out, fuzzy sound that this group pulls off just so well. I mean, with just the music, the album is really, really gorgeous for sure, but when combined with Victoria's croon, it's unmistakably and unapologetically Beach House, and there's a little I enjoy more, to be honest. Number 8. Sweetheart, Sweet Light by Spiritualized. Spiritualized. Now, certainly not to the extent of Tame Impala, but Jay Spaceman was another artist I didn't really expect to see on the list. Now, don't get me wrong, I love the group, and albums like Ladies and Gentlemen, We Are Floating in Space and Songs in A&E are great, but they've always just been shy of being in my top bands, and whereas that still might be true, it doesn't affect my opinion of this LP, which is that I love it. It's easily my favourite thing the group have ever put out. It really is some of the sweetest symphonic rock I've ever heard, and really that's unsurprising considering that is Spiritualized modus operandi. Now this album has some fantastic songs. Hey Jane, Little Girl, Too Late, Life is a Problem and So Long You Pretty Thing were some of my favourites of the year. However, the LP has stopped from being any higher on my list due to its slight inconsistency. Now this is purely a personal thing, but I just couldn't help being unimpressed by a couple of the songs here, specifically Get What You Deserve and Heading for the Top Now. They just kinda let me down. But these are some of the highest lows albums have to offer, and considering I liked my least favourite parts that much, the highs were really spectacular. I mean, Hey Jane, for example, it's a 9-minute rock ballad about the eponymous character essentially being a piece of human shit with no morals, and it's awesome. I mean, no matter how hammy they sound on paper, sentiments such as wishing you were dead so you don't have to feel pain anymore, or saying you won't get to heaven, have the appropriate emotional punch when sang with Jason Pierce's vaguely apathetic and confused tone. I mean, it's a voice that can tug at my heartstrings while being simultaneously worthy of the word, huh? I loved this LP, and I really wish it was all highlights, but what we got was absolutely nothing to sniff at. Don't worry, Mr. Spaceman. I think you're in heaven already. Number 7 is The Money Store by Death Grips. Now, regardless of their overall differences, Lonerism, Bloom and Sweetheart Sweet Light are all dreamy, very sugary sounding records. So I was thinking, how great is it that 3 LPs that are so sweet are followed by this fucking thing? I mean, I'd never heard of Death Grips before this LP. Ex-Military just sort of flew past me and I never even noticed it. So when I played this for the first time after hearing so many people online rave about it, I had no idea what to expect. And I suppose you can imagine my reaction if I didn't have any idea what to expect from The Money Store. Now, this is a very hard record to describe. I'm not a very big hip-hop fan, and at the time, I'd never heard anything like it. And to be honest, aside from Yeezus and the other things Death Grips have put out, I still haven't. It's industrial, it's seething with violent, unrestrained fury, and there's a bloke with tits on the front. What more could you possibly want? No, seriously, what else do you want? Because if there's something else you want, I can guarantee you Death Grips don't care. I'm serious, as part of the lyrics to the second song, which is The Fever, MC Ride just screams, "Fuck you." I mean, I showed it to a friend of mine, and he said it sounded like they were angry at me, personally. And I really think they are. I saw a YouTube comment on the video for I've Seen Footage, which is a single from the Money Store, and it really summed up my feelings well. And my feelings are that this seems like music from the future, really, really ahead of its time. And sure, you hip-hop nuts might be laughing and thinking, what a stupid, obviously single moron. People have been doing what Death Grips have been doing for years. But to me, that really doesn't matter. What matters is that through this thing I discovered something truly new and completely original, at least to me. It was a visceral, thrilling, frightening and intense experience to have this thing first blast through my headphones, and it still is every time I revisit this stunning, angry LP. Plus, there's a bloke with tits on the front. Quite frankly, if that's not a good enough reason for you to give this thing a listen, then I don't think I want you watching this YouTube channel. Number 6 is Frank Ocean's Channel Orange. Now, have you ever had that thought process of, if everyone's raving about it, I suppose I should give it a try before playing a new album? Of course you have, everyone has. I still discover quite a lot of my new bands and albums that way, because it doesn't usually steer me wrong. Sometimes it does, though. Japandroids, for example, received a very, very warm reception, and I really can't get into them still. Maybe in the future, but for now I'm scratching my head. I suppose at the end of the day, wherever, however you discover music is great, as long as you have your own opinion. And so, how does this relate to Channel Orange? Simple. I saw everyone was raving about it, and I prepared myself for yet another Japandroids-esque reaction. I thought, they might love it, but I just can't see myself getting into it. Now, an important thing to note is that when I first listened to this album, I wasn't an R&B fan, and I'm still not. I have since learned that Frank and The Weeknd, which are my two favourites in the genre, although I do easily prefer Frank, are apparently in a genre called alternative R&B. I don't really get why, but whatever, maybe I like that. So, even more than Tame Impala, this is an absolute shock to be on the list. As I said, my reaction to R&B, although I have been warming to it, tends to be from negative to violent. Is it because of the apparent alternative nature of this LP? Is it the production? Is it just Frank himself? I don't know. Probably all of the above. What I do know, however, is that it's the most gorgeously produced, catchy, sing-along album of the year for me, and no matter how many times I play it, it's still growing. The production was my favourite of the year, and Frank kept it fresh and interesting. I'm thinking of the PlayStation sounds here and the constant fuzzy interludes, an element which still charms me to this day. It's almost pushing Nico Jar levels of funk, and it puts Cadbury to shame in the area of chocolatey smoothness. Now, the one thing stopping it from being even higher, however, is the same problem that Sweetheart Sweet Light had. I'm not a massive fan of the tracks like Super Rich Kids, Sweet Life and Sierra Leone. Now, this thing did have Thinking About You, Pilot Jones, Pyramids Lost, Bad Religion and Forrest Gump, which were some of my favourite of the year. And, from Nostalgia Ultra to this, regardless of how good Channel Orange was, and it was exceptional, I can only see the quality of Frank's work getting higher and higher. He probably should invest in that condo in the clouds. Number 5, Shields by Grizzly Bear. Now, if only these guys had released this thing 1 year later, then we could have had a new Arcade Fire, Vampire Weekend, The National, Deer Hunter, and Grizzly Bear album all in 1 year. That could have been like the most exciting year in indie rock since, well, ever, and it was still pretty much my most exciting in recent years, so, wow, that would have been great. In any case, I think one of my favourite things about Grizzly Bear is their earthiness. A lot of people might say albums like Forever are the true earthy albums, but I disagree. Forever Ago is wintry and it should be played atop a frozen lake. Shields, however, is the true earthy album. It should be played in the middle of a sunny wood, with everyone dancing around the trees in barefoot, smelling pine and chasing animals, running through bushes, constructing dens from old branches and rolling around in the leaves. Grizzly Bear's production is something else that I really like. To mention them again, Arcade Fire have a very sharp production in my opinion. If something's happening, you can hear it and identify it pretty precisely. even if you don't know what's creating the sound, every sound itself is very, very sharp. I mean, Grizzly Bear, however, have a sort of fuzz to them, kind of like Beach House and Tame Impala, but a lot more charming. I mean, coupled with the distinctive voices of Daniel Rossen and Ed Drost, you get a sound truly befitting of the band's name, which is big, attention-grabbing, and most at home in the forest. Now, this is easily my favourite Grizzly Bear album. Songs like A Simple Answer and Gunshy, for example, don't resort to cheap rock cliches to be catchy, and the distortion is constantly at the best level. This is the kind of rustic, natural-sounding rock that we get from acts, to draw two comparisons once more, from Bon Iver, not the slick, polished refinement of groups like Arcade Fire, and where Grizzly Bear are concerned, I wouldn't have it any other way. Now that's not to say that Grizzly Bear aren't refined, but their refinement feels different to groups like Arcade Fire. Grizzly Bear seem like that one kid at school, for example, who could do his coursework the night before it was due, in messy, illegible biro and still got an A star. Their sound is less akin to an orchestra than it is to a group of bearded geniuses playing instruments they fashioned from timber. Grizzly Bear are still one of the only bands who I will describe as wooden, and mean it as nothing but a compliment. Number 4. Voltari by Sigur Rós. Now, when someone asks me what my least favourite Sigur Rós album is, I answer immediately, it's With a Buzz in Our Ears We Play Endlessly. And by the way, I'm not even going to try and pronounce it in Icelandic, so don't fucking ask me to. Now sure, it's a very good album, but there are times in it when I ask myself whether it's post-rock or indie pop I'm listening to. Now, I don't even ask myself that when I'm listening to the unrelentingly sweet Tack. I don't like to ask myself that question when I'm listening to Sigur Rós. I want to know I'm listening to post-rock. So I didn't know what to expect from this LP. You know, I was hoping for something in the same vein of Egetes Birun or the Parentheses album, rather than With a Buzz in Our Ears or Jonsi's Go. And what we got was kind of close to Egetes Birun, but it was closer to the Rice Boys' Sleeps than anything. Now, I have a love-hate relationship with ambient music. I love how relaxing it is, and I love how powerful it can be, but I don't like ambient music that just isn't interesting enough. You know, I think I'm more into drone than ambient. You know, give me Sun over Eno any day. Now, don't get me wrong, I listen to some pretty weird stuff, but it all draws me in. That's what links everything I listen to. And it's all for different reasons, but if something just doesn't interest me, then I'm not going to listen to it. And this is the most ambient record Sigur Rós have ever put out, and it just so happens to be one of my favourites, only very, very closely beaten by their second LP, Egetes Birun, and there's basically nothing in it. It interested me for the same reason that many of my favourite ambient artists and albums do. It was just unbelievably beautiful, and it was something I just enjoyed. I enjoy Oneohtrix and Tim Hecker for the same reasons, which is I don't know why their ambient tones just appeal to me, but the two artists pale absolutely compared to this. I mean, admittedly, I don't enjoy Varu or Rembinator as much as the other tracks, but fucking hell do I enjoy them. And as for my favourites, just, suffice to say, just wow. Jesus Christ, this album is magical. I mean, really, tracks 5, 6 and 7 are like one continuous journey through heaven. Eggander and Eki Mjuk make me want to... You know, I don't even know. I don't know how this album makes me feel, but I love it. I love every second of it. And the last track, Fugue Piano, is one of the most beautiful pieces of music I've ever heard in my entire life, and it remains my favourite song the group have ever done. You know, I really don't get why this album receives such a lukewarm reception in comparison to the band's earlier work. In my opinion, when you hear the swelling glacial soundscapes paired with Jonsi's otherworldly voice, you should know that this is a worthy successor to the band's unbeatable second LP. Number 3. Centipede Hurts by Animal Collective. Okay, now before I begin this segment, let me state something. Now, the hardest of the hardcore Animal Collective fans are probably going to roll their eyes and turn their nose up when I say something so cliched, but I don't care. I'm a big Animal Collective fan, and Merryweather Post Pavilion is my favourite album by them. It was lush, it was catchy, and it married enough of their classic experimentation with pop appeal to create something truly mind-blowingly psychedelic. So, really, I think Centipede Hurts was always kind of set up to fail. It was following something unfollowable, and unfortunately that sort of set it up for disappointment from the start. I think that's the main reason why so many people draw issue with Amnesiac despite it being exceptional. It was following Kid A, and nothing follows Kid A and does it well. Now, I know there's a myriad of issues that people have with this album. Some people didn't think it brought enough new material to the table, some weren't happy with the production, and some people just plain didn't like the fact that it wasn't another Merryweather Post Pavilion. But I'm not here to argue for this LP, just explain why I like it. And I like it because it's a great album, pure and simple. I really think it was the logical next step for the band. It's more experimental than its predecessor, but it does retain the catchy, poppy hooks in songs like Moonjock, Applesauce, Mercury Man, and of course, Amanita. Speaking of which, that last track is one of my favourite Animal Collective has ever done, so that's a pretty big bonus. The sound was frenzied and mechanical. It was a great compliment to Merriweather Post Pavilion's outside sort of foresty feel. Centipede Hurt sounded like a chorus of 90s computers, each malfunctioning while playing a different album from Animal Collective's back catalogue, with Merriweather Post Pavilion's Strawberry Jam malfunctioning the loudest. And once again, to rip off a comment I saw online about this album, Centipede Hurts is kind of the sound of Animal Collective going too far. I mean, sure, songs like Forever and Green, In the Flowers, or the final few moments of Graze were pushing it. But this thing, have you heard Monkey Riches? It's pure chaos, and every minute of it is just stellar. I loved the density on this LP, I loved the abrasiveness, I just love the fact that it puts such a stark contrast with the lushness of Merriweather Post Pavilion. Overall, I just love this charming, angry, messy, and brilliant little clusterfuck of an album. Number 2. Swans with The Seer. Lift music. You know, the music that they play in a lift. It's easy, isn't it? It's easy music to listen to. That's the whole point of lift music. It's meant to just be something easy, just plays in the background, no personality to it, just something that complements the wallpaper. Now, imagine an album just comprised of lift music, and it lasts 2 minutes, that's the entire album. That would be the easiest album of all time to listen to. Okay, think about that. Now, that is what something like The Seer makes The Money Store seem like. Now, The Money Store is like being on every drug in the world while having a gigantic brawl with the Prodigy in Gundams. The Seer transcends absolutely all of that, and it feels like nothing. I can't describe what a full listen of The Seer is like, because if I knew enough about its real-world counterpart, then I'd probably be dead, and my death would probably involve a volcano full of boiling tears. There's experimental rock, post-rock, post-punk, even a little bit of folk. It's all here, all linked together in torturous lengths with mind-destroying repetition, and all with Michael Gera's trademark grizzled, ghoulish snarl. This is the type of music that makes so-called dark music run for its mother. Oh sure, Marilyn Manson can make a creepy video and Slipknot think they're tough in their little masks. Bullet with Butterfly Wings is an unsettling song, and Insane Clown Posse are apparently horrorcore, whatever the hell that's supposed to be, but I have a message for that sort of music. Until you have listened to this LP, you don't know darkness. Until you've let the terrifying lyrics and chorus vocals of Lunacy wash over you. Until you've listened to the whatever the fuck sort of song 93rd Avenue B Blues is. Until you've sat in a dark room with the title track of 32 minutes playing in its entirety. Until you've comprehended the raw, blunt sadness of Song for a Warrior. You don't know the meaning of the word dark. Hell, you don't even know the word gloomy. At the end of the day, though, no matter how bleak this thing is, it is just an album. It can't hurt you, and the darkness it radiates is not the world we live in. It's not real, is what I'm getting at, no matter how twisted. And that might be why it turns out to be such a joyous, cathartic 2 hours of misguided, nasty, malicious happiness. This thing makes me feel more euphoria than it should. I think it's a testament to Gera to say that if this were the world we lived in, if the one portrayed in The Seer was our world, I'd have succumbed to lunacy a long time ago. But it's not. I enjoy my life, I'm happy, and that's why I can put this thing onto ear-splitting volumes and succumb to lunacy in a totally different sense. It's strange that Gera once said, a fear of death motivates him to make music, because when I'm listening to The Seer, I am unstoppable, I am a thing, not a he, I am dangerous, and the world can bring it the fuck on. If I'm standing up to darkness, Swans is what I'd like to have behind me, the bells on Avatar, the beat on The Seer Returns, and the post-rock influenced riffs on A Piece of the Sky make me unkillable. For such a dark album, its power to uplift is unprecedented. There is, however, one group that exceeds Swans in their power to create blinding light from infinite darkness, and the top spot could have gone to no one finer. So who was it? Who was it who was better at creating joy from terror than Swans? Who was it whose 2012 release was better than Tame Impala, Spiritualized, better than Beach House, Death Grips, Frank Ocean and Grizzly Bear? Better than Animal Collective, better than Sigur Rós, better than any artist who put anything out in 2012. Who was it? Well, for my top one spot, there was absolutely no contest. My top album of 2012 is Godspeed You Black Emperor's Alleluia, Don't Bend, Ascend. So, a little bit of background / time for me to act like a squealing fangirl. Godspeed have consistently proven themselves with every release, and yes, that does include Yankee UXO before you say, to be the best and most influential band around in modern instrumental post-rock. New groups such as Indie Howler, This Will Destroy You, and Sparrows Swarm and Sing show their Godspeed influence every time they play. The format of long songs interspersed with droning build-ups reaching cathartic crescendos might not have been invented by Godspeed, but they sure as shit perfected it. Godspeed reached the #1 slot this year because there was simply nothing as good released all year. Nothing was as good as this comeback masterpiece, and the reason is because no one else could have produced something better, because quite simply, no one else was Godspeed. This was their shortest album to be released to date, the older vinyl version of F Sharp, A Sharp, Infinity notwithstanding, and of course Slow Riot for New Zero Canada was an EP. And yet, Hallelujah Don't Bend Ascend turned out to be one of the most rewarding. Everything was captivating, everything was full of their trademark instrumental refinement, and everything was just perfect. I mean, the two drone pieces as well complemented the two 20-minute beasts fantastically. Melodic is one of the most angry, bombastic tracks, and if there's a Godspeed You Black Emperor track that you can actually dance to all the way through, you know some serious shit is going on. We Drift Like Worried Fire provides one of their best melodies, progressing and marching on through drone, instrumental shifts and changes. Through the whole track this melody persists and evolves until it's simultaneously the same and completely different. It might be only half the length, but to me this album manages to beat The Seer in every way. The Seer might be infinitely dark, but Hallelujah Don't Bend Ascend is the end of the universe. To quote my fellow reviewer when I first showed him Melodic, Johnny said it wasn't even like a song, it was more like just an experience. Even someone who had only heard one Godspeed You Black Emperor song once immediately grasped what they do, because what they produce is an experience. It's any story you want it to be, it's any feelings you want it to be. To me, this album isn't bleak, it's anything but. It's breaking free of bleakness, it's transcending everything normal. The Seer affects me, but nothing affects me to the extent Godspeed do. They give me this feeling of bubbling excitement and joy. I just want to do things when I'm listening to them. I want to Tom York dance, or air guitar the fuck out of an old walking stick, or just punch someone I don't like very much. And yes, Johnny, I'm looking at you. What I'm getting at is that their music is as much a physical experience as it is, well, a musical one. It seems like the type of music that would only be possible to be created by vengeful gods. It's the explosion of Krakatoa and the droning ring in your ears that follows. Godspeed are my joint favourite ever band, and so yes, I am just sort of using this as a platform to gush about them, as you might have noticed. But I don't care. To me, it's an amazing, spectacular, and perfect record. They're able to cram everything quintessential about themselves into this less than an hour LP and make it feel just as great, just as compelling, and just as natural as they did with Skinny Fists. The Seer makes me feel similar to this record, but it just doesn't reach the heights that Godspeed do. I don't even think any other band are capable, really. Some people might call the post-rock format of long songs with sinister drones, garbled vocal samples, and thrashing violent crescendos tired and predictable, but I really never would. Because to me, this format of music is now, and if it hasn't in some way always been, intrinsically Godspeed. They have some great modern-day contemporaries, Mono, Do Make Say Think, Explosions in the Sky, and to a lesser extent Mogwai. They all come to mind, and they're all fantastic, but none of them can stand up to Godspeed to me. When paired with the modern-day kings of instrumental rock, bands like Mono, Do Make Say Think, Explosion in the Sky, etc. just can't. They just can't win to me. I mean, the game was lost, it was rigged from the start, it was a moot point, a damp squib. It was inevitable. There is only one Godspeed You Black Emperor. There was only one Hallelujah Don't Bend Ascend, and because of those facts, there could have been only one top album of the year for me. So to all of these bands on this list, we say well done, and wish them Godspeed. Honourable mentions go to Kendrick Lamar's Good Kid Mad City, because if this list was based purely on quality, and preference was removed, this album would have definitely been on the list, quite highly in fact. It was easily the best hip-hop album of the year, not necessarily counting The Money Store, because really, can you just describe that thing as hip-hop? I mean, Kendrick proved to be a masterful songwriter and storyteller here. The production suited the scenes perfectly, with the dark, nocturnal sound of Shireen or the bombastic thumping of Backstreet Freestyle. He managed to make a track that I loved, despite it including the wish of your dick rivaling the Eiffel Tower in size. And why? It was because it fit into the concept, fit into the story. Kendrick is not a braggart, but his teenage self was to impress his friends. His acting is as great as his lyrics, and with the emotional voice cracks on Mad City, it just kills me every time. Unfortunately, it was edged out by lonerism in preference because I liked the sound and feel of Tame Impala's LP more. I'm not really a hip-hop fan, but rest assured, it may have not been in my top 10 favourites, but it was very, very close, and it was definitely one of the year's best. Another honourable mention goes to Alt J's An Awesome Wave. I think these guys did something really admirable. It set a perfect mark between experimental styles and pop sensibility. I quite liked the idea that it provided something poppy for the weird crowd and something weird for the poppy crowd. Now, whichever you found yourself in, there was a lot to enjoy. They jumped from fat, croaky synths to Middle Eastern rhythms, and they didn't even break a sweat. It did feel a bit like a jumbled mixed bag at times, but it was the pleasant jumble of a new band finding their feet. I can imagine their next LP, whenever it comes out, being more focused than this, but for the time being, we let Alt J have their fun, and we were all the better for it. These were cool too. I mean, I know I'm definitely missing tons and tons of really great albums, but oh well, that's life, isn't it? Bye, best friends!
Right,
Bye, best friends!
no, you're being stupid!
Fuck off! Fuck off, Jonathan! You are not my real dad! Right?
And I think we've heard enough of him. So you've heard from both me and Tom, what now? If you like what you've heard here, go ahead and click that enticing subscribe button, and you can hear me and Tom review albums on a weekly basis. It can't hurt. And at least leave us a like. It only takes a second of your day, but it helps our channel enormously. Thanks. And all that remains to say is thanks for watching, and hope you tune in again soon. See ya! The video star. The level of production on Take the Crown really is a huge asset to it. The lyrics mostly still revolve around the introspective examinations so familiar to any Robbie enthusiast, such as in Gospel, where Robbie recounts a brief childhood romance with nostalgia, but also a sadness that a picture he took in his mind of that time has been lost. This stands nicely as a metaphor for time moving on, as the track ultimately hints Robbie is prepared at last to do, as he drinks to his teenage fiancée, wishing her well wherever she is now. The album continues with the nonsensical lead single Candy. It is an undeniably catchy song though, however devoid of meaning the lyrics appear. Personally, I interpret the lyrics as a crusade against an illusory woman far too enamoured with her own appearance, who thinks she's as appealing as Candy, but is so obsessed with how others think of her that she never stops to enjoy life. Fellow single, Difference, is a much more mature sounding orchestral tinged ballad about Robbie promising to change to win back a fictional fiancée. Further on in the album, Shit on the Radio provides an unexpected dubstep effort that certainly provides a nice surprise for the regular Robbie listener. This is followed by All That I Want, which speaks brutally of sexual, almost primitive feelings directed towards a woman. Robbie concludes the track by asking if we think of him less for expressing his sexual feelings so honestly. I certainly don't. I think that takes a lot of bravery. Odes to Bob Dylan and U2 follow, being Hunting for You and Into the Silence respectively, the latter being really moving in its lyrical sparseness and slow pondering conclusion. Unfortunately, Hey Wow Wow Yeah Yeah follows, which is basically just a chorus-heavy, overblown excuse of a song with no lyrical depth at all. It is in fact the only reason the album doesn't place higher in my top 10. Not like the others injects a final adrenaline boost to the album before about my favourite rap album of the year. One of the things I like about Kane is that he's from the rare breed of rapper who isn't interested in using his lyrics to boast about how many girls he's had or wants to have. It's very refreshing to listen to Kane and get a break from all that stuff or rappers can't get enough of. Swearing too. Kane rarely swears in his rapping. Track 1, The Seed, kicks off the album with a fun, fast-paced guitar-filled rap. Following on, Golden Timbuktu forgoes such backing to put Kane's voice nearer the front of the track. Something this produces is a charming contrast between Kane's voice when singing the choruses and Kane's voice when rapping the verses. It's a song about the loss of youth and contains some great lines such as "Time is the pen and not the ink," a metaphor that suggests time is the controller of our lives rather than us writing our times and experiences ourselves. It's a clever bit of juxtaposition, adding to the message of the song, that while youth may fade, true love will not. The fact that Golden Timbuktu never needs to manifestly declare itself to be a love song to get across its message is a testament to Kanan's excellent songwriting skills. Kanan's sense of humour is evident on the album too, such as in Waiting is a Drug, where he declares, "Shout out to anybody named Mohammed, 'cause no lie, I know about 100. Track 4 is better. No, I mean it's a song titled Better. Not that it's better than the previous songs. Anyway, Better samples Lost by Coldplay, but you'll have forgotten that by the first chorus, because Kanan manages to make Better into a musical feast of optimism. Another notable song is Anybody Out There?, a duet with Nelly Furtado that brings a real pop feel to the album, and is a collaboration that works really well. Kanan once again samples on Hurt Me Tomorrow, where he samples the Beatles' Hey Jude material, with no weak links or fillers whatsoever. The EP races into life with Glad You Came, a bare bones, softly sung intro leading straight into a beat-driven pre-chorus, which continues to build with a huge backing beat. The track concludes with another softly sung portion, which leads into Chasing the Sun. With its addictive, meaningless chorus that peaks early and repeatedly, the track is a sure winner. The chorus I mentioned does consist solely of repeated "wah-oh-oh-ohs", but seems so innate that it fits nicely. And come on, this is a dance album, not a book of poetry. It doesn't need to be lyrically deep. Debut single, All Time Low, continues the onslaught of catchy beats, being much more vocally focused than the earlier entries to the EP. At track 4, Satellite is a previously unreleased track, but holds its own against the established hits surrounding it, with a chorus that peaks at a phenomenally high note. Lightning comes in strong with another gradual introduction, and proceeds to liken love to being as frightening as lightning. Whatever, like I said, dance music doesn't need deep lyrics. Heart Vacancy features beat-devoid verses, which makes a welcome refresher at the late stage of the EP, relying instead on small vocal peaks as the lyrics reach the chorus. Gold Forever proceeds to close the EP in a dazzling, lyrically optimistic yet experienced and mature style, with talk of saving memories of good times to combat future bad times. The best track and the best beat has been saved until last here, closing the EP with promises that present experiences will be remembered fondly. It ain't exactly Oscar Wilde, but it is a nice sentiment to end a fantastic album on. Position number 7 is occupied by Take the Crown, the latest solo album by pop superstar Robbie Williams. The introduction of producer Jack Knife Lee is a welcome change, pointing the Robbie Williams catalogue towards a safer direction, but also introducing a much more mature feel to the album than other recent efforts such as Reality. Well, some say music is getting worse and worse every year. Unfortunately, for the brainless morons who would have you believe that to be true, me and Tom have come to the debate armed with 20 examples to the contrary, which show that good music is in fact still very much alive and kicking. So come, journey with us as he and I present our respective top 10 albums of 2012. Kicking off our list at number 10, we have the debut album from Imagine Dragons, titled Night Visions. The thing I really love about this album is just how utterly unique it sounds. It has an undeniably distinctive style. It's a really great example of alternative rock as well, being really accessible and infectious even on a first listen. Radioactive kicks the album off in great style, a really electronic sounding track, but also really heavy, with deep booming lyrics. Beyond that, the album has many outstanding tracks, such as It's Time, On Top of the World, and Hear Me. Other tracks are simply stunning. The light, unmistakable underlying rhythm to Amsterdam makes for a really memorable pre-chorus and great listen, the bridge of the track leaving you with some lovely tinkly sound effects, followed by a huge vocal climax. My personal favourite track though is Bleeding Out, with its march-like drum beats and huge final chorus. The only thing stopping this album from moving higher up in the list is the sad fact that the final track, Nothing Left to Say, is blatantly stretched far beyond its working capacity, with a completely unnecessary moany outro. I can only presume this is an attempt to grapple another 2 minutes, an attempt to up the album length. This annoyed me, up until I heard the hidden track Rocks. It's a great way to end the album, really light but fast-paced. The onomatopoeic segment is really good too. Overall, a really solid debut album that showcases some impressive potential in an emerging band. Imagine Dragons are certainly ones to watch. Country God or the Girl by Kanan. Yep, it's time to find out. Once again though, we pause it off well enough to make it sound a completely different song. The Sound of My Breaking Heart plays next, a song where once again Kanan manages to deliver both a great rap and a beguiling chorus. The best thing though, as earlier mentioned, is the way his singing voice and his rapping voice contrast and complement each other so nicely. It means there's no need for him to have a singer doing the choruses for him, as many rappers do. he can cover the entire track himself. A simple, almost fully sung ballad follows, 70 Excuses, where K9 talks of different missed opportunities, surmounted by rejection by a lover. Tempo changes bring life back to the track every time it seems to be floundering, and there's a lovely horn-led percussion section fronting these tempo changes. The duet, Bulletproof Pride, starts to bring the album to a close, with Bono of U2 helping K9 bring depth to the choruses. The album then concludes with the tremendous pop anthem, The Wall. It's one of the best final songs I've ever heard, and make sure you don't leave the album with any ill will, with its hopeful message and tongue-friendly la 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 chorus. If Waving Flag was an advertisement for Coca-Cola, then this is an advert for casting prejudices aside. This, then, is a truly great album. But the number on the rosette, that can only mean there are another 8 albums I consider better. Indeed there are. Anyway, moving on to number 8, where we find my favourite dance album of the year. It's The Wanted EP by The Wanted. It's The Wanted's first American release and was released solely in America, acting to highlight the best tracks from their first 2 studio albums. Their best 7 tracks packaged into one concise, fantastically dance-centred EP. That's one of my favourite features of the EP, in fact, that in just 7 tracks and 24 minutes you have so much fantastic dance